We made a mistake when we got these fancy foreign-made faucets for our master bathroom. They're giving us problems. We can't get any service or parts, so I'm going to have to replace them. Now, I used to never touch plumbing in my home because every time I would, it would leak. But now I'm comfortable replacing sinks, faucets, running plumbing. And so in this video, I'm going to show you how to remove an old faucet and replace it with a new faucet. Now, as the replacement, I chose the Pfister Pasadena faucet because it matches pretty well with the other fixtures we have, and it's also a North American brand, which means I'm more likely going to be able to get warranty service. And as you'll see later in the video, I had to test that during this project. The first step is to remove the old faucet. Always start by shutting off the supply lines. I have these quarter turn ball valves and I've just put them to the closed position. Next, I'm going to take the supply lines off, drain them. Always make sure you have some bucket or towels underneath to catch any water that comes out. I'm going to go ahead and use an adjustable wrench here. Loosen these supply lines. I'm going to replace the supply lines when I put the new one on, just because it's been 18 years with these supply lines, so probably a good idea to change them out. And start it with the wrench, and then usually you can do it by hand. So in this case, the hot is over here. This line is going over there to where the hot tap is. And then do the other side here. And if your plumber didn't add shutoff valves to the supply lines, you're going to have to shut off water for the whole house, and then I suggest what you do is add shutoff valves to those lines, because any work that you need to do, repairs or anything else, you're definitely going to want to have shutoff valves, because all I'm impacting in the house right now is just this one faucet. I'm not impacting the rest of the house. The last water out of that. And these supply lines go up to the faucets under here. So I'm going to remove those as well, to remove all of it before I start taking off the actual handles. These lines that go from each tap to the actual spout, so those have to be removed as well. Anytime you have a spread faucet, you're going to have this sort of setup where it and that's where a lot of the water comes out. Which is why you also need a towel handy. So now that the supply lines are off underneath for both sides, I have to remove, so this part here, this collar, screws onto this particular base piece. Just letting some extra water when I open these out. And so it unscrews, and you can see that I tried to unscrew it. I've used WD-40 and it's not going to come off without some significant effort. So since I'm not trying to save this, again, I can't get any parts for it, I'm going to use my channel locks and unscrew that. It's going to need a little persuasion and force there. Now, fortunately, I have all the sort of parts list and kind of installation basics from when it was installed. So I know that this unscrews, the top handle here comes off, and then the cartridge down below, I'm going to have to remove that with a nut that's underneath it. Wow, there's a lot of buildup in there. So this base just unscrews off of the cartridge. You can see what's in there. Let me just zoom in so you can see all that buildup and corrosion. And then this is the ring that's going to come off. So I think perhaps I have to take this ring off. I'll look at the parts list again. Yeah, so this ring is going to come off. Okay. I think I have to loosen it from below now. Okay, so this is the nut here that I have to loosen. And you're doing this kind of blind. You can't get underneath there. Well, just even doing that a bit, it dropped out. So it was the ring up top that was holding it in. So I've now got one of the cartridges, the hot cartridge, is out. And that ring up top just comes off. It had some foam on it. So similar to the first one, I'm going to start by unscrewing this collar. Of course, now the whole thing is coming off because it's stuck together. Yeah, just crazy how hard that is, and see all the buildup in there. Takes patience a lot of the time with older plumbing. Finally can turn it by hand. There we go. So that's what the body below cartridge looks like. And I loosened this nut down below to drop it, to give it some space. So now I've got both of them out. Need to clean this up, but I also have to get the faucet out. Now before I remove the actual faucet here, this has a drain plug that attaches to this rod that comes down. So I'm going to have to remove this rod, and they all come a little differently. This one has a screw on this side, so I'm going to grab a screwdriver and remove that. It's almost of the faucets are held on by a nut. It's right here that then goes up and holds a plate onto the bottom side of the countertop. So I need to remove this. Use a nut driver if you can get that in there. Finally, got a 12 mm socket out. That worked way better. So we're going to depend on what we can get onto that nut. There's this plate that the nut pushes up to the bottom of the countertop. So you have to get that off to be able to get the actual faucet out. Faucet's finally out. So now that the faucet is out, the last part is to remove this drain stem. So this is one that has that rod that goes up and down to move the drain, and ours has just a flat spot here, so it wasn't hooked in like some of them are. So there's a few things we need to do to remove this. One is we're going to remove the rod here by unscrewing this, pulling that out. We're going to loosen this nut. Sometimes you're going to need channel locks for that. Just to get it started. You don't want to really bite up the plastic with the channel locks. Just get it started. That'll loosen this stem here. And then there's a nut here that's holding it on up top. So we're going to loosen that. To get it out, you also need to often remove the P-trap, which is why you keep this tub underneath there. So the P-trap will release this stem. So this is fully off, so I know it's now not engaged. Now when this comes off, it's often going to come off suddenly, so just be prepared for that. So it's just loosened off of there. You can see the water coming out. Very carefully. The P-trap's filled with water. All this is filled with water to prevent sewer gas from coming back up. So it is going to be messy. It depends on how long this is. There we go.
look in there. Okay, so now once I've loosened this nut all the way, then often from the top you have to hold the part that's in the drain. So I'm just holding it with a screwdriver in one of the holes there, and then you can unscrew that body. And then you can use the channel locks to take this nut off all the way, and then the top comes out. Drain assemblies are a bunch of different designs to them, so just be patient and figure out how your assembly comes apart. This one I can see the original installer used a whole bunch of silicone to get it to not leak, which isn't great, but I've got everything off of here. So before I just had the screwdriver in the hole here to hold it. Now I can see all the way through. Now it's just a matter of carefully loosening this and getting it up. Sometimes rotating it. There's an extra collar down below here to remove. Sometimes, yeah, so I've got another rubber gasket on the bottom that's attached to this post. You probably saw that from the other view. So I have to remove that. This allows me to hold the top while I unscrew this rubber gasket off the bottom. Okay, now this just comes up. And all the mess you see there is just from years of use, and that's got to be cleaned up.
Now that the old faucet has been removed and the countertop cleaned, we can go ahead and install the new Pfister faucet.
Now that we've got the supply shutoff valve issue fixed underneath and it's not leaking anymore, we can go ahead and start installing. I'm going to follow the instructions that Pfister gave me, and the first is to put each of these cartridges in. This is the cold. It has the little blue ring here. And it says it's very important. Underneath, you can see there's an arrow, and the arrow has to point to the sink. So in my case, it's going to end up going basically like that. And then it has, this is the nut that attaches from the bottom. Comes in the package, and because the thickness of the countertop is less than 2 inches, then looking at the instructions, it says the threads in this black part are to be up. So I'm going to thread it onto the bottom that way, and then they give you this special tool to tighten it from below. Okay, so now I'm going to reach underneath. Check, yep, it's supposed to go over both. sure that nut goes through. I'm just doing it blind. You can see it. I'm going to tighten up my hand first, and then use the AD. One of the things that the reviews have said is that getting this lined up so the handle is going to be lined up here, it's a little tricky if you don't do this, which is once I've got it hand tightened, I'll put the handle on and then I'll turn it to see that's fully on, that's fully off. So I want that parallel to the backsplash, and I'll take it off, and now I know I can hold it in that spot and use the special tool to tighten the nut. Now obviously you want to be a little careful, don't over tighten, or you could end up breaking your countertop depending on the material of the countertop. I'm going to do the same thing for the hot side. Looking where the arrow is. So again, do the handle test. Good position. Check. Okay, that looks pretty good. Always like to go back and give it a last. Make sure it's nice and tight. So to attach the handles, you place it on top in the right position, and then you rotate this base onto the cartridge until it comes in contact with the surface of the counter. Nice and snug, so that's off, that's fully on. Same with the other side here. sometimes to make sure the threads are going in properly. If it gets a little hard, you know it's not done properly. So, and off and on for each side. We've got them properly aligned. If you feel that they're not aligned, then again, just loosen the nut underneath and get them lined up. Next, we're going to put the spout on. I have to take this nut off, and it has the tool, but I'm going to start it because it's very tight. This one happens to be from the factory. Now I can take this all the way off. This is the part, and the bumps here are going to go up against the bottom of the countertop. So put this in. Sits there. Then I'll put this underneath and thread this on. Now, notice that there is one end that has a little notch. That's the bottom. And the reason the notch is there, when you're tightening this, if you can't use the tool that they gave you, because sometimes when a sink is installed, that tool is not going to spin in underneath, you can use either a wrench, if you've got one that's the right size, or this will allow you to use a big screwdriver to tighten this onto the bottom. So I'm going to figure out what size this is for a wrench so I can let you know that. So this is a 7/16 inch. If you have that wrench, you're going to be able to use that wrench if you want to. So I'm going to again put the bumps facing up. Bumps face up. So once you get it hand tight, what you want to do is to make sure that it's positioned properly, lining it up over the drain hole. Then you can use the tool or a ratchet to tighten it. This is a 7/16 inch bit. So you need to be careful you're not cranking it too much. Hold the faucet and spout in place. Tighten it so it's tight, but don't over tighten it or you might break the countertop. Okay, so I just realized I made a mistake in putting the handles on. Cartridges are fine, but there's a plastic ring that's supposed to go underneath each of the handles. So always make sure when you're going through the box as you're proceeding on to the next steps, you start finding parts that you go, where's this supposed to go? Which is what I just did. Make sure that you figure out where they go. So I'm going to look at the instructions. I think they go, yeah, that makes sense. That provides a better seal. It's in the off position. Okay. You can see that little ring underneath is now going into, as I screw it on, tightens against that ring instead of against your countertop, which protects the countertop. Get it lined up, else it won't keep turning. Okay, so again, off and on. Those are tight. Okay, the next step is to connect the hoses that come from each of the hot and the cold to this, which is going to go up into. So I'm going to click. You've got the blue to the blue, the red to the red, and they say tug on them to make sure they don't come off. And this is going to connect to click, pull on this to make sure they're all secure. So this feeds from the cold and the hot into the spout. Okay, I have my new supply lines I need to attach to my shutoff valves. Lined up, make sure they go on by hand first, and snug it up with your adjustable wrench. Again, not over tightening because you don't want to cause a problem. Okay, so again, this is my hot on that side, and my cold is on this side. So your supply lines aren't always going to line up with where your taps are. Okay, now Pfister makes these little adapters that go in to the 1/2 inch supply line and then create the particular adapter they need to go to each of the sides. So the way that you're to put them in is to put them in by hand first. And you're going to use their tool. So you're going to hold supply line, use the tool, and get that nice and tight. Okay. The other one. Okay. So now we have our supply lines prepped to attach up to the connectors there. I'm going to take my cold supply line and line it up. And you thread it on. There are 2 O-rings there. And you tighten it on, not using a wrench. You don't use a wrench for this. And we'll do the same for the hot supply. Double check they're both tight. Yep. So now that the faucet's installed, we have to install the drain. And this is a pop-up drain. I like how these work. Except this one just broke. Well, that's unfortunate. Gonna have to install it anyways, otherwise I can't use this sink. So you disassemble it, take off the parts. This gasket stays here because you don't use plumber's putty for this. You slide it through the hole here, and it's going to seal onto the sink. Keep it in the down position. It's going to seal onto the sink, and then down below we're going to screw these on. So it's a two-part process from the top and the bottom. So I'm going to slide this down the top. This is what's going to hold it on. So I'll start that only just a little bit. Now I'm going to take this plumbing and put the nut on first. This part slides on, and it's going to have to slide up a fair ways. There we go. Bring it down a bit. So again, we need to connect it to our P-trap. Okay, so connect this from the bottom to the sink first. And all of these connections you're just doing hand tight. You're not using wrenches or channel locks because you don't want to break it. The one thing I like about these Pfister drains, I've used them a couple times before, is they have these nice rubber gaskets that seal nicely. Now we can tighten this down. Again, all hand tight. And to test a drain, I never turn the water on and then test it. I always want to take a glass or a bucket, fill it up somewhere else. Some water from another faucet here. Pour that down. And as you can see, that's why you want to test it this way, because it leaked a fair bit here at the top. And I think that's, yeah, that's this. There's all that old silicone there that's causing now a problem. So I'm gonna have to remove that. Okay, I've scraped all the silicone off. Let's try this again. Looks like we're all dry. So that's why we test with a cup or a pitcher of water before we ever turn any of the water supply on, to make sure you know that it's not going to leak. So now we can test the water supply, turning it on. So I'm going to start with the cold supply here. And our hot supply. Okay. I expect to hear some air in the lines because we had shut the water off. So I'll start with the cold. And what they say is always take the aerator off before you run the water. Forgot to do that. Take the aerator off. The reason you do that is because there's probably a little bit of sediment or something in the line,
You don't want that clogging up the aerator. There was a tiny bit there. Hot. Run that. Reach underneath. I'm going to check all these connections, make sure that everything is dry. Now I can put the aerator back on. It kind of sprays out too far. Put the aerator. Aerator back on. Hot and cold on. And we just blew a connection. The hot mixer in. Okay, this is why we go slow in testing. This is why we double check things. And why we always have a bucket underneath. So I might have, in reaching up to check, I might have pressed the button that released the hot, not sure. Okay, so one of the good tests to do for the drain is to close the drain so it's closed and fill the sink at least halfway with water. And we're going to test two things. First of all, is it going to hold the water? So we're listening carefully. I don't hear water going down the drain. Not feeling anything here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to release the pop-up, the drain, and a whole lot of water is going to rush down, and that's a good test for our drainage plumbing. Again, testing all of our connections, and I'm not feeling anything. Just that water sprayed out from before, my problem. So I think that means that we have successfully installed our Pfister Pasadena faucet and replaced the one that was foreign made and was causing us problems. Follow the instructions, take it step by step, and I'm sure this is a DIY plumbing project you can do in your home. You saw when I was installing the drain that the pop-up broke the first time that I used it. Now this is one of the reasons I wanted to go with a North American brand, because I'm more likely to be able to get warranty service. So I did the installation on a Thursday. The next day, the Friday, I submitted a warranty request through their website. On Monday, they got back to me and they asked for a photo of the faucet actually installed. Now I actually think it's good that they checked to make sure that I hadn't already returned it, that I actually had installed it. So I sent in the photo, and on Tuesday they said yes, warranty claim approved, we're sending out the part. And by Friday I had it in our mailbox. That's the type of service that we as DIYers need when something does go wrong. So I'm really glad that I chose this North American brand because I was able to prove that the warranty service is going to be there. If you have a spread handle bathroom faucet that you need to replace, hopefully now you have the confidence to be able to replace it yourself. If your pipes don't have shutoff valves or they're leaking, watch this video where I show you how to add a shutoff valve or replace a leaking one like I had to do during this project. Thanks for watching.